There is a big debate brewing across the country on bias in the Supreme Court. Some in the Supreme Court believe that some of the justices are biased towards the Trump administration. Trump believes the opposite, effectively. Let's talk about where this started from. So on Friday evening, by a 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court allowed the Trump administration's wealth test for immigrants to take effect in Illinois. All 4 liberal justices dissented from the order, which changes relatively little thanks to the conservative justices' intervention in January. The wealth test was poised to take effect in 49 states. Friday's vote lets the government apply it in the last state left. And there was a dissenting opinion written by Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who effectively made the case that when lower courts rule against the Trump administration goes running immediately to the Supreme Court and says, this is an emergency, you need to save us and overturn that lower court ruling. No multi-year process of working its way up through the courts. It's you need to take this up right now and you need to help us immediately. And she's noticed a pattern in the way this plays out. Here's a bit of her dissenting opinion. Claiming one emergency after another, the government has recently sought stays in an unprecedented number of cases, demanding immediate attention and consuming limited court resources in each. And with each successive application of courts, its cries of urgency ring increasingly hollow. She added, perhaps most troublingly, the court's recent behavior on stay applications has benefited one litigant over all others, a reference obviously to Donald Trump and his administration. And that's really the problem. They have 5 justices now. If a lower court rules against them, he has a get out of, balance of powers free that he can go to anytime he wants right now.
Yeah, so basically the Trump administration is using the Supreme Court, not in the way it's intended, but as a funnel to rubber stamp its very controversial policies and often racist and discriminatory policies. And that's not how the court system is supposed to be used. So Sonia Sotomayor here is pointing out that she's troubled by the way that the Trump administration is funneling basically their policies through, because they know that they have these 5 conservative justices who are just going to okay whatever the Trump administration wants to do. But that's really what the legislative arm of the government is supposed to be participating in. It's theoretically supposed to be a body that's encouraged to be compromising. We, in this era of partisan politics where everyone's bought off, that's not the reality. But just because that's not the reality doesn't mean you get to use the court system in the way that the legislature is supposed to be used in that sense.
So this isn't even anything where Justice Sotomayor is pulling this out of nowhere. Trump has said this. He said it over and over again. He's like, well, we have the Supreme Court. As long as we have the Supreme Court, everything will be okay. If this goes to the Supreme Court, it'll be okay. Everything that it has any kind of pushback from other under court systems, he makes sure he says, we can send it to the Supreme Court and it'll be okay. He and Mitch McConnell have talked about how the biggest legacy they have is switching over the courts in this country, because that's a legacy that lasts forever. You can be in office for 8 years, but then if you put someone in a permanent position in a court, on the Supreme Court especially, it'll live on forever. We saw how it happened at the end of Obama's administration to the beginning of Trump's, and how they want to keep packing the courts. Now they'll do exactly what they say everyone else is trying to do. These libs trying to pack the courts and flip things and make sure everyone actually has rights and freedoms in this country. What we want to do is push a conservative lean to all these courts, and it's exactly what they're doing. There was a graphic that they put forward about the number of judges that Trump has appointed in his 3 years now versus the 8 years under Obama. And guess who was chuckling like a demon about it was Mitch McConnell. He's like, that's not by mistake. He was laughing just like that. So when
it's eerie.
So you can have pushback on what Justice Sotomayor said, but you have to have pushback on what you've already said in the past, because it's exactly the same.
Yeah. For right now, I mean, I'm glad that she was able, or I guess I should say, willing to be so honest. You have her writing these dissenting opinions as part of the 4 liberal minority on the court, and if Trump gets reelected, we can look forward to her continuing to do that as part of the 3 liberal. Or 2 liberal, or maybe by the end of 8 years, 1 liberal minority on the Supreme Court. Those will be exciting times. And what sort of justices will he be replacing the current ones with? Well, we know what he wants, and what he wants is loyalty. He certainly hates disloyalty. Here he is talking about the bias he believes exists on the Supreme Court.
What is the basis for your opinion on that?
Well, it's very obvious. I mean, I always thought that, frankly, that Justice Ginsburg should do it, because she went wild during the campaign when I was running. I don't know who she was for. Perhaps she was for Hillary Clinton, if you can believe it. But she said some things that were obviously very inappropriate. She later sort of apologized. I wouldn't say it was an apology, but she sort of apologized. And then Justice Sotomayor said what she said yesterday. You know very well what she said yesterday. It was a big story. And I just don't know how they can not recuse themselves for anything having to do with Trump or Trump-related. The right thing to do is that. Now, as a Supreme Court justice is a different standard, but at the same time, I think it's a higher standard in a certain sense. So they'll have to decide what to do. But her statement was so inappropriate. When you're a justice of the Supreme Court, and it's almost what she's trying to do is take the people that do feel a different way and get them to vote the way that she would like them to vote. I just thought it was so inappropriate. Such a terrible statement for a Supreme Court justice.
So there he is talking about his belief, his wish, his fantasy that the two of the liberals on the court should recuse themselves from any case involving him. And because it's Donald Trump, historically, that means it's gonna be a lot of cases. So he's got the majority in the court, and 2 of the 4 liberals should just butt out of every single one of those cases that he and the DOJ and the Trump administration in general gets the Supreme Court to pluck out from the lower courts and immediately take up to make his agenda happen.
Why does he even care? The 5 conservative justices are just gonna vote with him anyway. And so it's just really all ego, because he sees these 2 very outspoken Supreme Court justices talking about what they see as an undemocratic, unconstitutional way of going about things in terms of the judicial system, and they are of course correct here. And I love how he's lecturing people on inappropriate statements. And another piece of hypocrisy, and how it's just all projection with a lot of conservatives these days, is he expects loyalty, as John said, from these Supreme Court justices, even though they don't serve him. But he's one of the most disloyal people in American history to the people that he works with. So it's just another irony on top of the many ironies that that Trump personifies.
I dare one of these conservative justices to actually rule on a large enough case against Trump and see what he has to say about them then. This whole loyalty thing and how great it is that he appointed these people on the courts. If any of them has any kind of wavering support of him, it'll turn into, we'll see more revelations about what he really thinks of people. So if we're talking about recusing themselves, you mentioned how he may not know the word recuse. He only learned it because of Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, that's true.
When he was upset about the fact that he did do it. But I was reading an article earlier this day, and I didn't think it would be relevant, so I skimmed it. But Jenny Thomas, the wife of Justice Thomas on the Supreme Court, that same Supreme Court that Trump wants the loyalty for and wants 2 justices to recuse themselves from, she works on making sure that the White House has rid themselves of all of these snakes and backbiters and disloyal people after the impeachment process. So she's mad about that, and she's whispering in the ear of White House aides about personnel at the White House, as well as ridding them of other folks that aren't loyal enough. That's not a connection to the Supreme Court. The wife, a political conservative activist in our country, is connected to a Supreme Court justice who always rules in favor of conservatives, and particularly this president. And 2 of the people that she was suggesting be on staff is Dan Bongino and Sheriff Clark. So these are so Justice Thomas shouldn't be recusing himself on everything related to Trump, because your wife is directly related in meeting with Trump officials about personnel in the White House and also ridding other people so that things can stay loyal within his lawlessness.
That's a great point, but you are discounting the fact that Clarence Thomas is one of the 10 worst people in the country.
And also, Trump specifically said that he didn't like what Ginsburg said. And so we don't have to worry about that with Thomas, since he's never spoken in public, actually.
Because he's loyal.
Exactly.
It's weird. If you only have to be principled, which by the way is not even a principled stance if they recuse themselves. You only be principled if it's something that's associated with being against Trump. So if you're against me, then you're principled to step aside. But again, when Jeff Sessions was trying to be principled and recused himself, that's disloyalty. It has nothing to do with principles at all.
That's how low the bar is for being principled. But Jeff Sessions was trying to be principled. That's just basic ethics then.
Yeah.
Don't miss your chance to win a trip to Los Angeles and have dinner with Cenk, John, and me. Just head to tyt.com/dinnerinla to register to win. Sign up for a free Aspirations Spend and Save account. Then you just register your eligibility and swipe your aspiration card daily on purchases to gain entries. Not only are you entering to win a trip to Los Angeles and dinner with TYT hosts, you're also not depositing your hard-earned money into fossil fuel exploration or production. As a friendly reminder, even if you already have an aspiration account, you must still register for eligibility into the sweepstakes.